what if the reason you can't speak fluent English at work has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of vocabulary?
Right, which is what everyone assumes.
Exactly. I mean, we always said we just need to study more. But what if it actually has everything to do with how your brain calculates physical danger?
It's a pretty wild concept to wrap your head around, honestly.
Think about that for a second. You might be sitting there, blaming your grammar when your nervous system is actually treating a weekly team meeting like a literal predator.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And honestly, it's a huge relief for a lot of people to hear that.
It really is. So welcome to this session of Advanced English Listening Practice on the Speak Up English Hub channel. I'm so glad you're joining us today.
Me too. We have a really, really great topic lined up for you.
We do. Today we're bringing you a comprehensive analysis of a fascinating and, frankly, deeply frustrating disconnect that happens when you're mastering a new skill.
Right, the gap between knowing and doing.
Exactly. So imagine this. You're sitting in front of a piano. You can read the sheet music perfectly. You know every single note on that page.
You understand the chords, the timing.
Yeah, you recognize the rests, the complex progressions. I mean, you can actually hear the entire song playing beautifully in your head, right?
The theory is completely solid. You have this total passive comprehension of the music. You appreciate the nuance, the tempo, all of the emotion.
But then, and this is where it all falls apart, you lift your hands, you place your fingers on the keys, and suddenly just nothing happens. Your hands completely freeze.
It's like the signal from the brain it just gets lost on the way to the fingers.
Right. You know exactly what the music is supposed to sound like, but you just cannot make the instrument actually play the song. And we are targeting that exact performance gap today.
It's such a common struggle.
It really is. We're looking at why so many of you listening right now can understand English perfectly. You follow complex, fast-paced corporate meetings.
You catch every subtle, culturally specific joke in a movie.
Yeah. You read dense financial reports without breaking a sweat. But the second it's time for you to speak, especially in high-stakes workplace environments, you completely freeze up.
And our mission today is to break down the actionable daily steps to cross that bridge. We are charting the course from that passive understanding to confident, active fluency.
Because it's not a mystery, right? There's a science to this.
There absolutely is. We're going to look at the psychology, the neuroscience, and the workplace cultural dynamics that make this transition so difficult for highly competent professionals.
And I think that phrase, highly competent professionals, is really the crux of the issue here. We need to explicitly acknowledge the psychological pain of this specific demographic.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very specific kind of frustration.
We're calling this the competency trap. If you are listening to this, you are likely a smart, capable adult. In your native language, you're articulate, right? You make nuanced arguments.
You're funny. You command respect in a room.
Exactly. But when you switch to English, you suddenly feel like a child. You feel stripped of your personality and your intellectual authority.
And that hurts. It's a profound loss of status. And frankly, your brain absolutely hates it.
Right, because the brain doesn't just say, oh, I'm bad at this language.
Yeah.
It says, I am losing my social standing.
Exactly. That loss of status triggers a very real physiological response. The human brain is constantly assessing the environment for risk.
Always on the lookout for danger.
Right. And in our evolutionary past, a loss of social standing or appearing incompetent in front of the group, that could mean being ostracized, which was literally a life or death scenario.
Wow. So it's not just embarrassment, it's primal.
It is entirely primal. So when you're in a meeting and you're trying to formulate a sentence in English and you realize, I might stumble or I might use the wrong preposition.
Your brain perceives a massive social threat.
Yes. It activates a mild fight or flight response. Your heart rate elevates, cortisol floods your system, and your cognitive resources are literally diverted away from language processing and pushed toward sheer survival.
That is wild. So my brain is essentially treating a quarterly marketing update like a physical threat just because I might look incompetent.
That's exactly what's happening. The system is hijacked.
And I think the most common reaction to that fear is this mental trap where we tell ourselves, well, I just need to study more before I'm ready to speak.
The not ready trap. It's so insidious.
It really is. We retreat to the safety of passive learning. We watch another grammar video. We read another article. It reminds me of watching endless YouTube tutorials on how to paint.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. You can buy every art book in the world. You can watch 100 hours of brushstroke technique. But if you never pick up a paintbrush and actually put paint on paper, you will never become a painter.
And by waiting for this magical feeling of confidence to arrive before you finally speak, you're actually confirming to your brain that the threat is real.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Well, confidence isn't a prerequisite for action, right? It's a byproduct of action. Confidence is a conclusion your brain draws from hard evidence.
So if you don't act, the brain has no evidence.
Exactly. You're asking your nervous system to feel secure about a capability it has literally never seen you demonstrate in the real world.
That makes so much sense. I like to think about retrieving an English word under pressure as being like trying to hike through a really dense, overgrown jungle.
Okay, I like this. Walk me through it.
So passive listening, just watching videos, is just looking at a beautiful, clear map of the jungle. You know where the paths are supposed to be.
Right. The theory's there.
But speaking is taking a machete and actually chopping a physical path through all those thick vines. The first time you try to find a word, it's incredibly difficult. You're swinging blindly.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. But the more you do it, the wider that trail gets. And eventually, that dense jungle path becomes a paved road, and word retrieval happens instantly. But you cannot clear that path by staring at the map. You have to actually swing the machete.
I love that. But of course, to clear that path without triggering that fight or flight response we talked about, we have to remove the social threat.
Right, because we don't want to panic while holding a machete.
Exactly. So we do this by creating what we can call a low-stakes sandbox. And this brings us to a highly effective, actionable daily routine that anyone can start today.
I love actionable steps. What is it?
Pick a time every single day, maybe right after dinner or, right before bed. Open the voice memo app on your phone and just record yourself speaking for 2 minutes about your day.
Just 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes. But here's the brilliance of using the voice memo. There's absolutely no script.
Oh, okay. So you're forcing your brain to operate without a safety net, but with zero social risk, because literally nobody else is listening.
Exactly. You are swinging the machete in an empty room. You're forcing your hippocampus to actively search for the neural pathways connecting the concept to the English word. And you're strengthening those synaptic connections in real time.
So you just talk. Like, where did you go? Who did you talk to? What frustrated you today?
Yes, you're producing language, forming sentences, and experiencing that slight healthy pressure of dead air. And you can listen back to it to hear your progress, or you could immediately delete it.
The recording itself doesn't actually matter.
Not at all. The act of retrieving the words is the entire point.
That is so simple, but so powerful. And, you can also turn your passive consumption into active production throughout the day. Like if you're listening to this analysis right now, instead of just moving on to the next video or article when we're done, actively summarize what you just heard out loud for 60 seconds.
Oh, that's a brilliant habit to build.
Right. Explain the competency trap or the jungle metaphor to the empty room. You take the passive input and you force it to become active output.
And that's how you build the road.
Okay, so let's say you've been doing this. You've been playing in the low-stakes sandbox. You are clearing those neural pathways. The next hurdle is taking that new voice out of the empty room and into the real world, specifically into the workplace.
And that is exactly where the nerves spike again, because the social threat returns. You're no longer in an empty room.
So how do we handle that? Because managing those workplace nerves, it's not just about obsessing over whether you use the past perfect tense correctly, is it?
No, not at all. Actually, it's about shifting your focus entirely outward. It's about building cultural trust. In English-speaking work environments, trust really begins when people feel you see them as an individual, not just a mechanism to complete a task.
Okay, so you build this by showing genuine interest in them.
Yeah.
But this is where we run into a fascinating cultural friction point, right?
Oh, massive friction point.
Because in many cultures around the world, asking personal questions at work is considered highly intrusive. Work and personal life are kept strictly, rigidly separate.
Right, a workplace is for producing results, not making friends.
Exactly. So for a lot of professionals listening right now, asking colleagues about their weekends or their personal lives feels incredibly risky. It feels like crossing a professional line.
And that invisible cultural expectation is exactly what trips up so many technically brilliant professionals when they move into English-speaking corporate cultures, like, those in the US, the UK, or Canada.
So what's the expectation there?
In these specific environments, an entirely task-based approach can actually damage trust. Showing interest in a coworker's weekend or a project they're struggling with is not seen as nosy. It is a fundamental signal of respect.
It demonstrates that you value them as a human being.
Precisely. We are moving from task-based trust to relationship-based trust. However, and this is a big however, there are strict professional boundaries you have to navigate within this framework.
Right. The rules of engagement are quite specific. You want to show interest, but you do not want to be their therapist or an interrogator.
Exactly. Keep it light but genuine.
So asking about weekend plans, professional achievements, hobbies, or work challenges, that is highly encouraged. But you firmly avoid politics, romantic relationships, religion, family planning, or personal finances.
You have to operate in this safe zone of casual, supportive, personal interest. And operating in that safe zone lowers what linguists call the affective filter.
The affective filter, what is that?
It's essentially an emotional barrier.
Yeah.
When someone feels seen and comfortable around you, their affective filter drops, meaning they are more open, more relaxed, and honestly much more forgiving of any linguistic mistakes you might make.
Oh, wow. So making them comfortable actually buys you grace.
Yes. And remarkably, as you focus on making them comfortable, your own affective filter drops, reducing your anxiety and making it easier for you to retrieve your English vocabulary.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
But I have to point out, just asking generic questions does not actually lower that filter. Like if I walk into the office and say, "How was your weekend?" every single Monday morning, it just becomes robotic white noise.
Yeah, it's a greeting at that point, not a genuine question.
Exactly. To actually build relationship-based trust, you need specific follow-up questions that prove you were actively listening to them in the past.
This is where you leverage your memory to signal deep respect. Instead of the generic greeting, you use targeted phrases.
Give me some examples of that.
Sure. So you might say, "I remember you mentioned your client presentation last week. How did that turn out?" Or, "I noticed you've been working on that massive software update. What's been the most challenging part of that so far?"
Oh, I like that. Those phrases prove that their words actually lingered with you after the conversation ended. You're not just waiting for your turn to speak. You are actively valuing their experience.
And that builds incredible trust.
It does. But of course, trust is easy when everything is going perfectly, right? When you're just chatting about a successful presentation.
Oh, for sure. The real test is the hard stuff.
Exactly. True fluency and unshakable workplace trust are tested during moments of friction, misunderstanding, or disagreement. That is usually when the conversational panic hits the absolute hardest.
Because during moments of friction, the cognitive load on a non-native speaker becomes completely overwhelming.
I can imagine. There's so much going on.
Think about it. You're trying to listen to their argument, translate it, process the emotional tone, formulate your defense in your native language, translate that defense into English, and check it for grammar all at the exact same time.
It's just too much processing power.
Your working memory is completely hijacked.
And the physiological result of that hijacked working memory is that you just completely stop listening to the other person.
Yeah.
You disconnect from the reality of conversation because you are terrified of dead air or of saying the wrong thing.
You retreat into your own head to just frantically rehearse your script.
So how do we stop that? How do we stay in the conversation?
To stop that spiral, you have to find a way to instantly reduce your cognitive load. And the most effective technique for this is active summarization.
Active summarization.
Yes. It acts as a pressure release valve for your brain, anchoring you firmly back into the present moment.
So active summarization means replacing that panicked internal rehearsal with a structured echoing response.
Right.
Like when a colleague expresses a concern or a disagreement, instead of rushing to defend yourself or panicking to invent a brilliant counter-argument on the spot, you deliberately buy yourself time.
How do you usually phrase that?
You use phrases like, "Let me make sure I understood you correctly. You are saying that the new software might slow down our response times."
And by simply repeating what they said, you are utilizing just a fraction of the cognitive energy it takes to generate a brand new idea. It physically calms your central nervous system.
Because the words are already there, you're just echoing.
Exactly. And beyond the internal benefits, it deeply validates the other person. You are proving that their concern has been heard and registered. It de-escalates the friction and creates a psychologically safe environment to resolve the issue.
Okay, so that handles disagreements well. But let's explore the ultimate source of friction. What happens when that active summarization reveals that the miscommunication was actually your fault?
The mistake.
Because culturally, admitting a mistake feels like walking into an absolute minefield, doesn't it?
It is a massive cultural counterintuition. Because in many business cultures globally, Admitting a mistake publicly is devastating to your credibility.
Right, it implies incompetence, a loss of face.
Yeah, and it's something you avoid, deflect, or hide at all costs. But in English-speaking work cultures, owning a mistake publicly is viewed through a completely different lens. It is seen as a profound sign of honesty, self-awareness, courage, and executive leadership.
This huge shift. Trying to hide the mistake or sweeping it under the rug actually damages your reputation exponentially more than the mistake itself in these cultures.
Without a doubt. But admitting fault is an art form. You do not want to completely undermine your professional standing by groveling.
Yes, over-apologizing is actually a destructive behavior.
Yeah.
If you say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, my inbox was flooded, I was totally swamped, my alarm didn't go off, please forgive me.
You're completely changing the dynamic.
Exactly. You are suddenly shifting the emotional labor onto your coworker.
That is a critical insight. When you grovel, you force your colleague to comfort you. They have to say, oh, don't worry, it's fine, I know you're busy. You are making your mistake their emotional problem.
And it makes you look disorganized and insecure.
It really does. So, to admit fault confidently and maintain your status, you follow a very clinical professional formula. You state the error, you take ownership, you offer the solution, and you move forward. We can call this the SOS protocol. State, own, solve.
I love that. SOS, state, own, solve. So instead of the panicked groveling, the SOS protocol sounds clean and authoritative. It sounds like this. I made a mistake by not including you on that email. I should have made sure you were part of the conversation. I have added you to the thread now, and going forward, I will double check my distribution lists.
Perfect. There is zero drama in that response. You state the fact, you take responsibility without excuses, you fix it in the present, and you prevent it in the future.
It's so professional.
It actually elevates your perceived competence because you are taking total calm charge of the failure. It signals to your team that you are secure enough in your role to be transparent, which gives everyone else permission to be honest about their own roadblocks.
That is incredibly empowering. So we've covered practicing your speaking in the sandbox, asking specific follow-up questions to build relationship-based trust, using active summarization to reduce cognitive load, and courageously executing the SOS protocol when you make a mistake.
It's a solid toolkit.
It really is.
Yeah.
But there is a final critical layer to this analysis. You can memorize all of these techniques, but if your behavior does not match your vocabulary, the language becomes entirely meaningless.
Right, because people aren't just listening to your perfect English, they are meticulously watching your actions.
Exactly. Words without aligned actions are completely hollow, and they destroy trust faster than poor grammar ever could.
Aligning your actions with your words is the ultimate proof of your fluency. It demonstrates that you don't just know the dictionary definitions of the words you're using, you completely understand their cultural weight, their subtext, and their real-world implications in the office.
I call this the hypocrisy observation. Nothing destroys a team's psychological safety faster than a leader who uses beautiful, flawless English to talk about work-life balance while simultaneously sending out demanding emails to the team at 3 a.m.
Oh, the 3 a.m. emails, we've all seen them.
Right, or a manager who uses all the right corporate buzzwords about transparency and collaboration, but then makes all the significant structural decisions in secret behind closed doors.
And the rule here is simple. If your actions contradict the English phrases you are using, your colleagues will always trust your actions, not your words.
Always.
To build unshakable trust, you have to explicitly link what you do to what you say. You have to actively narrate your choices so your team sees the alignment.
Narrate your choices. I like that phrase.
It reduces the cognitive load on your coworkers because they no longer have to guess your true intentions. Your words and actions are a unified front.
So to narrate those choices and make that link explicitly clear to your colleagues, you can use very specific framing phrases. For example, if you are honoring a previous strategic decision, even when it is difficult, you might say, since this is the direction we agreed on during Tuesday's meeting, I'm going to stick to this timeline as well.
That's a great example. Or if you're addressing that burnout scenario we talked about, you don't just quietly leave the office. You narrate the boundary out loud. You say, I know we are all feeling the pressure of this launch, so I am logging off at 6 p.m. tonight to rest, and I strongly encourage all of you to do exactly the same.
You set the boundary out loud, you tie it directly to a shared corporate value, like rest or sustainable efficiency, and then, and this is the most important part, you actually have to log off at 6 p.m.
And they're walk the walk.
You cannot say the phrase and then secretly stay online. answering emails on your phone under the desk. When your colleagues see you repeatedly deliver on the exact words you used, they learn that your English is not just a performance or a corporate mask. It is a reliable indicator of reality.
So as we synthesize everything we've covered today, what does this actually mean for your daily life?
That's the big question.
Moving from passive understanding to active fluency is not an overnight magic trick. It's not just a vocabulary drill. It is a daily, deliberate practice of proving to your nervous system that you are safe.
It starts with the smallest, most private steps. Opening your phone in an empty room, playing in a low-stakes sandbox, and hacking those neural pathways through the jungle.
And as you give your brain that hard evidence that you can survive speaking out loud, it naturally evolves into powerful external workplace habits.
Shifting your focus outward to lower the affective filter, asking specific follow-up questions that prove you value your colleagues as humans.
Pausing to actively summarize their concerns instead of panicking.
Yes, and having the sheer courage to own your mistakes using the SOS protocol without dumping emotional labor onto your team.
We began today by visualizing someone sitting at a piano, knowing all the theory, hearing the beautiful music in their head, but finding their hands completely frozen on the keys.
Such a frustrating feeling.
But every single mechanism we have explored today, the voice memos, the summarization, the precise alignment of words and actions, these are the tools to finally thaw out your hands.
They really are.
These are the methods you use to press those keys and start making actual music in the real world.
And as you practice pressing those keys this week, we want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to carry with you. Think about the workplace conversations you avoided today because you told yourself you just didn't feel ready to speak yet.
We all have those moments.
What if the only thing actually keeping you from fluency isn't a lack of English vocabulary, but simply your refusal to be imperfect out loud? Keep swinging the machete, embrace the wrong notes, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks for being with us. See you on our next video. Let's speak up.